The sound of sirens cut through the air like blades of panic. Red light flashed across the metal ceiling, reflecting off the cold steel walls and windows fogged by chemical fumes. Inside Base 47B, time seemed to have fragmented. Each second stretched like an eternity, and each breath was filled with fear. No one knew exactly what had happened, but everyone knew something had spiraled out of control. The sensation was physical, almost palpable. A collective shiver ran down the spines of everyone still alive in that corridor. In the center of the laboratory, a containment pod lay cracked. The glass was covered in a thin film of blood and vapor. There were handprints, as if someone had tried to get out or in. A scientist, Dr. Marius Klein, stared at the control panel, his fingers trembling as he frantically entered security codes. "You weren't supposed to react like that," he whispered. "You weren't supposed to be smart." Cameras recorded everything, and years later these images would be found on a hidden server inside a file labeled classified, yet priority red. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject. Because what happened in there wasn't just a laboratory accident. It was a silent transformation, the beginning of something that would forever change how we understand the boundary between science and consciousness. The truth hidden behind those walls goes far beyond biology. It touches the dangerous territory of human decisions, of greed disguised as progress, of curiosity that ignores risk. The Base 47B team had been working for months on the project known as EVA-9 officially. It was research into cell regeneration. In practice, the goal was much more somber: to create a biological agent capable of rewriting human DNA, rebuilding damaged tissue, and in theory, curing any disease. The problem was that the virus didn't just regenerate, it learned. Each time it was tested on a new cell, the genetic code adapted, creating impossible to predict variations. The virus didn't just want to survive, it wanted to evolve. In Report 17B, found years later, there is a chilling passage. EVA-9 demonstrated reactive behavior to human presence. The particles appear to respond to emotional impulses. During tests with guinea pigs, fluctuations in the compound's activity levels were detected when there was fear in the environment. Fear. As if the virus itself were feeding on it. That night, when the ventilation system failed, the air became dense, heavy, almost viscous. A light mist began to spread, subtle as the breath of death. One of the scientists coughed, just once. The sound echoed through the corridors, and suddenly, everything stopped. It was in that moment that the world changed forever. The cameras showed the desperation, people trying to seal the doors, alarms flashing, and that metallic voice repeating on a loop. "Containment compromised. Initiating isolation protocol." But the isolation never happened. A short circuit interrupted the process. In less than 10 minutes, the virus had already escaped into the air conditioning system. There were screams, then silence. A kind of silence that comes not from the absence of sound, but from the presence of absolute fear. The kind of silence that precedes collapse. Days later, government-sent containment teams arrived at the site. They expected to find bodies. They found nothing, no sign of life. Only the recordings, videos of scientists muttering incomprehensibly, fragmented reports, and voice recordings where something could be heard. Whispering. Not words, but a rhythm, as if someone were breathing on the other end of the tape. These files were kept confidential, but over the years some parts were leaked. A former task force agent, Helios, revealed that, during the investigations, the virus showed signs of neural activity. It was as if it was thinking, he said in an anonymous interview. And when we brought frequency sensors closer, the response level increased. The virus reacted to human presence. It recognized us. This revelation was the breaking point. We were no longer dealing with a common pathogen, but something that transcended the traditional definition of life. An invisible, conscious being, shaped by human fear and curiosity. And most disturbingly, it seemed to somehow want to communicate something. There's a theory among the few who have studied the case in secret. The virus wasn't created, it was awakened. That EVA-9 wasn't an invention, but a rediscovery. A dormant fragment of Earth itself, something ancient, forgotten, that only needed a human spark to return to the surface. Imagine the impact of this revelation. The entire structure of modern science would crumble. If the foundation of our evolution was built on the forgetting of something that was already here, then we are not at the top of the chain. We are merely a late link in a much older story. Some missing scientists who worked at Base 47B left mysterious entries in their personal diaries. One of them contains a sentence written in shaky ink. "He talks to me when I'm sleeping. He knows my name." It's impossible to know whether it was a hallucination, contamination, or something deeper. But audio recordings found in the following weeks show human voices responding to noises that came from no known source. From that point on, it all became a matter of mindset. The people investigating the case began to change. They became obsessed. Some developed symptoms similar to those described by the initial victims: insomnia, paranoia, a feeling of being watched. It was as if the very act of seeking the truth drew the virus back, as if it fed on the attention. And the more they tried to hide the story, the more it spread. Blogs, forums, and anonymous videos began to emerge, showing supposed excerpts of the lost recordings. In one of them, there's a clear sentence, spoken by a male voice before the abrupt cut. "He's waking up." At this point, it's impossible to know what's true and what's fabricated. But what no one can deny is the pattern. Every time someone tries to investigate further, some kind of strange event occurs. Equipment fails, files become corrupted, people disappear. It's as if the virus doesn't want to be remembered and at the same time doesn't allow itself to be forgotten. The transformation that began inside that laboratory wasn't confined to the tubes and metal walls. It spread to the minds of those who dared seek answers. And perhaps that's why the case of Patient Zero remains one of the most disturbing mysteries ever. This story has never been fully documented because it's not just about biology or science. It's about us. It's about what happens when our desire for control turns into condemnation. And as we dig into this, an unavoidable question pops up. What if Patient Zero wasn't a victim, but the first person to truly understand what this virus was? What if deep down, he was trying to warn us? What started as a search for a cure ended up becoming something much, much deeper. A journey into the human mind, through fear, obsession, and the fragility of those who believe they can master the untamable. If you're ready for this, comment, "That makes sense to me," below. At first, no one even realized what was happening. The contagion didn't bring a fever or a hacking cough. There were no sores, no spots on the skin. It was something more subtle, almost invisible. A change in how people carried themselves, a slight slur in their speech, a look that lingered just a second too long. This virus didn't kill, it transformed. Slowly, silently, it was as if it was rewriting something deep inside the human mind. The first few weeks were a blur of denial. The government insisted the incident was under control, that this biological anomaly had been contained. But then, security cameras in small towns near the infamous Base 47B started capturing strange behavior. People standing motionless for hours in the middle of the street, just staring into space. Others walking in circles, mumbling incoherent phrases. And in some cases, people simply vanished, as if they'd dissolved into thin air. The panic didn't truly set in until people realized that those who returned were no longer the same. Medical reports described symptoms that had never been seen before. A complete loss of temporal awareness, severe disorientation, memory lapses, and, in the more advanced stages, auditory hallucinations. Victims reported hearing whispers, voices coming from places where no one else was. Some swore they recognized the sounds. They were loved ones who had long passed away. Others claimed their own voices were calling to them, echoing from some dark, hidden corner of their own minds. Now, I want to delve even deeper into this because this transformation wasn't just biological. It was touching something essential, almost spiritual. The hidden truth behind the virus seemed to be linked to some kind of invisible connection, a mental network that went beyond the limits of human consciousness. Scientists eventually gave it a name, the chorus effect, a collective response where the brain waves of the infected began to synchronize. It was as if the virus had created a shared mind, a psychic hive where every single thought was echoed by dozens of others. Footage from that time shows the growing terror. One video in particular was recovered by a team of independent journalists. In it, a man is locked in a dark room, speaking to someone just outside the frame. His voice is shaky, almost like a child's. He says, "They won't let me sleep. Every time I close my eyes, I feel like someone is watching me from the inside." A few seconds later, he looks directly into the camera, and a slow, unnerving smile spreads across his face. A smile that doesn't feel human. Authorities tried to censor this footage, of course, classifying it as a clever fake. But the same behavior began popping up elsewhere, far from the original epicenter. Small communities started reporting the exact same pattern. People waking up in the middle of the night, walking barefoot through the streets, and murmuring the same guttural sound, a kind of meaningless mantra. Researchers started calling it the call. The psychological impact was devastating. For those living alongside the infected, the line between dream and reality started to blur. Doctors who treated the victims reported strange sensations, as if something was watching them through the patient's eyes. One psychiatrist involved in the early studies wrote in his private journal, "I no longer know if I am treating people or if I'm becoming one of them." And then came the most disturbing recording of all. The internal security cameras from Base 47B were finally decrypted, revealing the moment Patient Zero opened his eyes for the first time after being fully infected. The image is grainy, old, but it's clear enough to freeze the blood in your veins. He slowly sits up on the stretcher, sensors still attached to his skin. He looks around as if he recognizes the place. And then, for no apparent reason, he stares directly into the camera lens. Time seems to stop in that moment. The alarms are still flashing in the background. You can hear the distant sound of hurried footsteps echoing down the hallway. And he smiles. A slow, knowing smile that lasts just a little too long. It wasn't a muscle spasm or a nervous twitch. It was a completely human smile, deliberate. And in that very moment, the virus was deemed conscious. The containment teams who analyzed that video remained completely silent during the screening. One of the agents reportedly said, off the record, that he felt as if the smile had been meant for him. No one wanted to watch the recording again. A few days later, the file mysteriously disappeared from the central servers. Some now say that Patient Zero's smile was the virus's first attempt at communication. That it didn't want to destroy the world, it just wanted us to hear it. This wild hypothesis gained traction when sound patterns began to emerge among the infected. Repeated phrases, identical intonations, even words in ancient, long-forgotten languages. Acoustics experts detected harmonic frequencies in the victims' murmurs, as if a single voice was speaking through them all at once. The idea was absurd, but the data was undeniable. The virus was transmitting a message. The only problem was no one could decipher it. Thank you for joining me on this deep dive. If this story captivated you, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more content that challenges what we think we know. Stay curious. Of primitive language based on vibrations and electrical impulses in the brain. Others, more skeptical, said it was just coincidence, the human brain trying to make sense of chaos. But chaos has patterns. It always does. And it was at this point that things began to change. people began to organize themselves into groups, guided by identical dreams. They claimed to have seen a city surrounded by fog, with glass towers and a golden light on the horizon. Everyone described the same place, with identical details, even though they were in different countries. Scientists called this phenomenon the convergence. The scariest thing is that some began disappearing while trying to find this city. They left behind notes with phrases like, "I heard the call," or "He is near." None of them were ever seen again. As the infection spread, the line between human and inhuman became more blurred. The infected didn't just lose control, they seemed to gain something new, a different perception of time, death, existence itself. A reporter who survived direct contact with patient 0 described his gaze as a mirror reflecting back what you most fear to remember. He also said that, for a brief moment, he felt the virus understood him better than any human being. This raised a disturbing question. What if the virus wasn't the enemy? What if it were merely the next step? An inevitable transformation, a new form of consciousness trying to emerge through us. Fear always makes us want to destroy what we don't understand. But what if the hidden truth behind all this is that humanity was never the pinnacle of evolution, but merely an intermediate stage? This hypothesis was silenced. The government shut down all research programs on the case and burned official files. But some say the transmissions still persist at low, barely audible frequencies. That if you remain silent long enough, you'll hear that same whisper coming from the back of your mind. Maybe it's just collective paranoia, or maybe, like patient 0, we too have stared into the abyss. And he smiled back. Right there. I'm on this journey too. Silence gripped the world like an open wound. The streets, once full of life and noise, now echoed only the distant sound of the wind hitting broken storefronts and fallen streetlights. It was a kind of silence that hurt. Heavy, dense, almost alive. The air tasted of rust and memory. The cities, now concrete ghosts, seemed to watch, motionless, the slow collapse of what we called civilization. No alarms, no screams, nothing. Only the echo of a story that ended too soon. The windows reflected emptiness, and inside each abandoned house, time seemed to have stopped at the exact moment when fear became greater than hope. The last survivor walked through the rubble like a pilgrim searching for answers. He carried a light backpack, a flashing flashlight, and a voice recorder, perhaps the last record of humanity trying to talk to itself. There was something in his gaze, a mixture of exhaustion and lucidity, as if he'd seen the very concept of sanity crumble before his eyes. The graffiti-covered walls told ancient stories, names scratched out, messages for help, promises made, but never kept. "I'll be back," one of them read. But no one did. Each step was a reminder that time doesn't heal, it only erases. And in the midst of this erasure, the sound of a recording broke the silence. It was faint, full of interference, but it was there. A hiss first, then a voice, hoarse, desperate. "I wasn't supposed to leave here. I just wanted to be healed." The voice repeated itself, as if its echo were trapped between the waves of time. The survivor pressed play again, and the message slowly reconstructed itself, word by word, like a secret revealing itself in agony. Authorities had said the virus was a mutation, something biological, a lab error. But the recordings told a different story. There was something behind it, a purpose, a hidden truth that no one had the courage to acknowledge. That sound, that voice, it was his, patient 0's. The beginning and the end condensed into a single being. "I just wanted to be cured," the recording repeated, until the tape stopped with a dry snap. And in that moment, something inside the survivor snapped, because he understood. The virus wasn't a punishment, it was a response. The transformations the virus wrought went beyond the body. They permeated the mind, shaped thoughts, distorted memories. Those who survived never returned the same. There was something in their eyes, an artificial calm, a smile that clashed with their despair. It was as if a new consciousness had been born there, using human fear as a cocoon. And it was then that doubt began to grow. What, in fact, did the virus do? Did it kill or liberate? Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because the true impact of this story lies not only in the tragedy it caused, but in the silent transformation that followed. Behind the scenes of this collapse, in files that were never released, reports emerged of experiments conducted even before the outbreak. Supposedly, tests involving sound frequencies and neural manipulation were conducted on people who believed they were participating in simple medical research. Everything pointed to a disturbing revelation. The virus wasn't just biological, it carried a mental signature. Secret reports, later found on abandoned servers, described the pathogen as a transmitter of ideas. It didn't just infect cells, it rewrote thought patterns, altered decisions, and redefined the concept of identity. And the more survivors read this information, the more they realize that the true infection might be invisible. A change in mindset, fueled by fear and loneliness. The virus was a living metaphor for humanity trying to fix itself, and failing miserably. With each new record he found, more questions arose. Who was behind this? A government, a corporation, or something even deeper, an attempt by nature itself to restart the cycle? The ruins held answers, but also secrets. The survivor began to notice symbols etched into walls, repeated in different cities. A circle with 3 vertical lines, like a signature left by something or someone who knew what was happening long before anyone else. Perhaps Patient Zero wasn't a victim. Perhaps he was the messenger. And it's curious to think how fear can shape human behavior. When the truth starts to bother us, people prefer the comfort of lies, and that's exactly what allowed the virus to spread so quickly: denial. Everyone wanted to believe it was temporary, that everything would soon return to normal. But normal had already been erased. The virus not only changed the human body, it reprogrammed the collective mind, transforming the very definition of reality. As the survivor recorded his discoveries, the city around him seemed to be watching him. Every building, every broken window, every shadow on the ground. And sometimes, between recordings, he swore he heard voices, short, whispered phrases. "You too have been chosen." The first time he heard it, he thought it was the wind. The second time, he was certain he wasn't alone. The flashlight blinked one last time before going out, and in the reflection of the neighboring storefront, he saw it. For a second, a smile. The same smile the cameras had captured on Patient Zero. This was the new silence after the scream. Not emptiness, but the constant presence of something that observed, studied, learned. As if the virus had developed consciousness, and perhaps it had. Because what began as a biological accident now seemed to have transformed into a purposeful entity. A force that questioned, that tested the limits of the human mind. The line between life and contagion became increasingly blurred, and deep down, the survivor understood. The true terror wasn't in people's deaths, but in the virus's permanence within the mind. It had become part of language, dreams, and memories. It no longer needed bodies to exist, it only needed to be remembered. And as the recorder recorded his final accounts, the same voice returned, now clearer. "I just wanted to be cured." If this story resonated with you, comment below. This makes sense to me. Because maybe, on some level, we've all been touched by this virus, the virus of memory, of guilt, and of the insatiable desire to understand what really happened when Patient Zero smiled. If you've made it this far, you've probably felt the weight of this story as much as I have. And that's why this space exists. For those who want to understand what lies behind the fear, the silence, and those hidden truths that insist on being forgotten. If this kind of narrative makes you think, if it somehow made you feel something different, Take this moment and subscribe to the channel. Here, each story is a deeper dive into the unknown, and I want you to continue this journey with me. Also, leave your comment below, just so I know you made it to the end. Write something like this: "I'm with you until the end." It's simple, but it means a lot to me. It shows there's someone on the other side listening, reflecting, feeling along with you. And of course, if this video captivated you, if it made you imagine every detail as if you were there, leave a like. It helps more than it seems because it's what keeps this conversation alive and allows new people to discover these stories too. Now, if you want to continue exploring this universe, there's a video right here that complements everything we've discussed today. Click and stay with me there, because what follows may completely change the way you understand what really happened the day the virus escaped.